Welcome to my 283rd video on my work with OO gauge. This past Saturday, April the 27th, 2024, I went over to the Jim Archdekin Recreation Centre in Brampton, Ontario, Canada, to attend the 2024 Great British Train Show. And in this video I'll be talking a bit about my visit to the show, showing some pictures of the layouts and models on exhibit, and reviewing the haul that I brought back from the show. The Great British Train Show is the only show in my neck of the woods, southern Ontario, Canada, that is devoted specifically and entirely to British railway modelling. This show is generally held every 2 years, and I last attended in 2022. The show was held in the Recreation Centre's arena. For the most part, vendors were set up all round the outside, and the centre space was devoted almost entirely to exhibits. There were many fine layouts on display, as well as some other displays related to British modelling. Because the arena was quite large, there was plenty of room to move around. I was there on the first morning of the show on Saturday, and it seemed to me as though it wasn't quite as well attended as in 2022, although I've been to quite a few shows since then, so my memory of the 2022 event isn't exactly sharp. All of the vendors at this event were selling items, new and used, related to British railway modelling, so I was spoiled for choice, and I didn't have to follow my usual Canadian show practice of looking for British clues amongst all of the Canadian and US items on sale. Seen here is part of the vendor booth for British Model Trains of Cambridge, Ontario, basically our premier local dealer in British Railways items. There were exhibits in a wide variety of scales. This table featured a number of Gauge 1 items. There were around 20 exhibitors, mainly showing operating layouts, although there were some other types of exhibit. This was an end-to-end type layout on a Great Western prototype. Here's the station and cattle dock for that layout. Another end-to-end layout featuring a clay works and a boat dock. Here's the works end of that layout. And here's a boat in the dock at the other end of that layout. There was a large Hornby Doublow display, which was of particular interest to me. The Doublow exhibit layout was quite a bit bigger than mine. I do wish I could make space to extend my own. It featured an extended version of the Doublow Central Station. There was actually a complete Doublow Central Station offered for sale, quite a hard item to find, and I would have loved to buy it, but there didn't seem to be much point, given that I can't see how I'd manage to use it on a layout. The exhibit layout included pretty much every standard Doublow layout accessory item, and most of the standard Doublow rolling stock appeared somewhere on the layout. Note that Doublow electrically operated points are being used, very obvious because of those big brown boxes beside them. Here's the side station on that layout, using a combination of the through station and the island platform, as I do for the station on my own Doublow 3-rail layout. And here's the freight depot on that layout, with what appears to be a super quick goods building as well as the Doublow goods building item. This was another end-to-end layout with a Great Western theme. This one was an unusual exhibit, modelling a railway in India. Here's a write-up on that Indian prototype. And here is that exhibit layout, quite a small tabletop. Note the Indian passengers waiting in the upper waiting building, and the Indian posters on the wall at bottom. I seem to have missed the label for this Balmoral Road layout. This seems to be based around the time of nationalisation. There's an LNER van here, but there were also British Railways items on the layout. That appears to be an ex-GWR diesel rail car in the station at back there. Here the exhibitor is trying to re-rail an ex-GWR Prairie tank in BR livery. A bridge at the end of that layout with some posters and road vehicles. Here is the write-up for another layout. This was an end-to-end layout with a factory and passenger station at this end. The dock itself was featured at the other end of the layout. Here another train has pulled into the dock area behind the wall there. This was essentially a corner layout featuring a factory. Here's a general view of the Nemo engineering works. There's a Ruston diesel with a couple of weathered vans, and road vehicles featured by the factory entrance. This was a longish N-gauge layout. I'm afraid I failed to get the name of it. Here an A4 is pulling a combination of teak and blood and custard coaches round the end of the layout. N-gauge does allow much more space for buildings, etc. And this layout had quite its own little housing development. Here's even more housing along a road behind the station. The far end of this layout featured a gasometer. Here the A4 with its train is coming along the front of the layout. There was a substantial display of Meccano. Here's more of that display with some informational material. The range of models that can be built with Meccano is virtually limitless, and all sorts of operating machines can be made. Here are some railway engines made from Meccano or similar. And here are a variety of other vehicles. This was a very compact tabletop layout. I have to wonder why several cows, pigs and other animals all appear to be crowding into the fish and chip shop. This was another end-to-end layout with a joint LMS and LNER theme. Trains in the yard on that layout. A Ginty and a couple of coaches at the other end of Navigation Hill. This O-gauge shunting layout was put together specifically as an experiment in economical construction. And here is one end of that layout. There was a tricks display. This was much smaller than the Dublo exhibit, just a small tabletop really, but it did manage to include many of the available tricks items. I'm not even sure what this is, a German engine perhaps? Here you can see a variety of tricks rolling stock with the tricks operating conveyor loader going over the top. I did consider buying one of those as it's an interesting operating item, but I passed eventually since you really need quite a bit of space to effectively set up this conveyor. There was also a Trix Manyways Central Station on display. Here's another Manyways station building and the standard book on Trix model railways in Britain, which I don't have a copy of. This was the smallest layout exhibited in 2mm fine scale. That's not the label you're seeing there, that's the actual exhibit layout. This was a live steam exhibit, i.e. engines actually driven by steam. Here's one of the live steam engines running. I'm not sure what scale that is. A bit bigger than O gauge, I believe. Here are some more items on that display. And here's the operating steam engine going around the corner. This was the largest model on display, although it didn't operate or move at all at the show. This was another exhibit with a primarily Great Western theme. Here's a GWR train coming under the bridge on that layout. Here's the hill above that bridge. Here's that train going round the end of the layout. On the far side of that layout, 2 coaling towers were set up, but the engine by them's a British Railways diesel. Here's a viaduct on the corner of that layout. A small N-gauge exhibit based on a lemon curd factory. And there's the factory with a mixture of GWR and BR rolling stock. There was a fairly large exhibit layout on a Thomas the Tank Engine theme. Here are a couple of the anthropomorphic engines with Thomas-themed figures in the station. I don't really follow Thomas the Tank Engine. I think this is Toby the Tram. Some more stock on the Thomas layout. Apparently some rolling stock has a face and some doesn't in the Thomas universe, well, at least in this layout's universe. Here there's someone fixing a derailment on the Thomas layout. This was another exhibit that I found particularly engaging, featuring Hornby O-gauge clockwork railways. This was quite an extensive exhibit. Here you can see the standard book on Hornby O-gauge. The exhibit featured lots of Hornby stock and accessory items. This attractive tin plate station, for example. Being clockwork, these locos couldn't simply be left running, so periodic demonstrations were scheduled. I was especially taken with this clockwork version of the Royal Scot. Here's the Royal Scot engine. And here's one of the coaches. Some more fine tin plate accessory items. I don't think that station clock is a Hornby item, but it does fit in quite well. More Hornby clockwork items. The engine there has the most typical control system with 2 pull-out operating rods on the back, one for stop-start and the other for reversing. And yet more tin plate accessories, including a level crossing and a signal gantry. This was quite a large layout with a mid-20th century industrial feel. Here are some of the houses on that layout with a Caledonian hotel and what looks like a Midland signal box. This layout featured weathered BR diesel engines. Here are 2 BR diesel trains in the station. Here's a church on that layout. This area, with the turntable and engine shed, appeared to be still under construction. Here's the end corner of that layout. I quite like this large LMS building featured on the end of that layout. Round the corner, this layout even featured a helipad, although currently without helicopter. So, now I'm going to pass on to reviewing what I brought back from this year's Great British Show. I did come back with several bags full, not very surprisingly, given that this show offered a much greater range of items for British Railway modelling than other local shows. So I came back with quite a number of kits, as well as rolling stock and books and other odds and ends. I bought this complete 00 train set. I'm not sure that this was really a terribly wise purchase for me. It's nice, but probably doesn't really offer me a lot that I can actually use. I see that this particular set was sold by a dealer in New York. This is an example of the EDG7 goods set. Given that it was sold by a New York dealer, I assume that old marked price represents $29.95, either US or Canadian. The set did appear to be complete and in good condition. I'd be kind of tempted to try that controller, see how it works. I'm not sure why those little coils of green wire are there. If you know, please tell me in the comments below. The set featured an N2 engine in apparently excellent shape, with its original inspection tag from Binns Road still attached. This 00 set also came with a booklet of layout designs, an envelope of insulating tabs, and a guarantee certificate. I note that the booklet of layout designs is marked with a price of threepence, the 3D at lower right there. These are all of the kits that I brought back from this show. If I can pick up kits of prototypes that interest me at a good price, I'll generally go for it, as I like to build kits myself, and kit build videos are amongst the more popular on this channel. I don't really know about these coach kits. The vendor was only asking $5 each for them, and I said I'd take 3 just to see what they were and how they worked out. But he didn't actually have the kits individually boxed, he just had a sort of big pile of parts, and he had to sort out stuff for my 3 coaches. 3 bodies, 3 roofs, 6 bogies, 12 axles, etc. I get the impression that producing good coach models from these kits is going to prove quite challenging. I picked up these 4 older Parkside kits for $5 each. They're all for LNER vans rather than LMS, but I think they'll fit in fine on my layouts if I can build them well. I also picked up these 2 brand new Parkside kits. I wonder if there'll be much difference between these and the older ones. I see that these say transfers included. I'll be interested to see what transfers are actually provided. My past experience has been that even for stock from the Big 4 era, generally transfers are only provided for BR use. I bought these 2 kits for cattle wagons, one Coopercraft, one Dapol. Could be an interesting comparison. I also bought 2 ready-to-run cattle wagons with simplex couplings, and a couple of road vehicles. The mail van is probably a bit too big for 00 gauge. I picked up this sheet of HMRS transfers from the same vendor as the coach kits. Although I don't generally make pre-grouping models, these decals will likely feed into my LMS prototype. And I picked up another 00 loading gauge in its original box, and a boxed set of dinky die-cast station staff figures. I bought this kit-built Fowler 4F. I have quite a few 4Fs, Airfix, Hornby, Bachmann, maybe even a kit-built one already, but I figured that this was sufficiently interesting to warrant investment, especially as the vendor gave me a good price. I picked up the 2 Airfix coaches at top very cheaply. It often seems to me that Airfix coaches are undervalued. They look quite nice and they generally run well. The lower Airfix item here is an auto coach. At bottom is a Trix coach with simplex couplings. At left is a set of Slater's seated figures. I've gone through a couple of sets of these before. They're handy for use as drivers for road vehicles, seated rail passengers, etc. though painting them is quite fiddly. Finally, I picked up a number of books. I do try to resist buying books, as my house is packed out with books as it is, but in this case there were a lot of books on British railway history on offer at 50% off the already low marked prices, so I couldn't resist picking up a few that especially appealed to me. So that's it for now. All being well, some of the items from this show will be appearing in future videos on this channel.